Hello, everyone. Thanks a lot for joining for this session on climate education revolution, digital literacy platforms for sustainable development. I'm joined here today by Jayanta Chowdhury, who's the Director Alliance for an Energy Efficient Economy, or we'll just call it AEEE from now on. And then we'll have Marcos Antonio here, who is a research impact fellow from the University of Exeter. So in this session today, we'll look closer on how, well, given that education is of course a really key issue, well, very key for climate action, we'll look a bit closer of what role can digital platforms play in this regard. So Jayanta, maybe I'll give you the floor to start and to just present first, give us a brief overview of what AEEE is doing, and specifically also from the Indian, and then zoom into the Indian perspective.
Thank you so much, Robin. I lead the industry engagement at AEEE. We are a research think tank primarily working on energy efficiency and decarbonization in different sectors. So we work very closely with the government and also, the subnational level. So to your question, I think digital literacy and education, especially in a country like India, I think it's extremely important and critical, especially after post-COVID. I think that's really taken on a very different level. Because of the sheer size of India and the population, 1.4 billion plus and counting, it sets its own set of challenges. So probably I'll just set a little bit of a perspective is the internet access is not universal across India. The rural and the urban, there's a huge difference in the quality of internet access. So that provides like the first challenge to this. Second is integrating anything to do with climate and the education in the existing curriculum is very difficult in India because of the federal structure and the way there are different ownerships. So implementation becomes a huge challenge. And third, even if you're able to do that to a large extent, language barriers play a very important role. We have, last count, some 2,700 languages and dialects in India, and even if I have the main languages, to convert any of the curriculum into vernacular languages is a huge challenge. But the positive side is, of course, this is a very critical thing that the government of India is driving. So there are multiple programs and policies. There's a Digital India, which looks at providing internet connection across India. Then, of course, you might have heard of Lifestyle for Environment, which is government kind of led by our Prime Minister, which also kind of promotes digital education. And the third is, of course, there are national education policy, climate change, which is integrated. So there are two major inputs, through which the digital education is provided. So one is called Diksha, which is primarily at the school level, and Swayam, which is at the university level. So I'll just give you some perspective of numbers. Course enrollment in Diksha, 185 million people. 146 million certificates were issued and courses were completed. 4.7 million teachers have been taught over the digital platform. Swayam, there are more than 50 million students who have enrolled for almost 16,500 courses. So that's the kind of numbers we are talking about in India and the challenges. But yeah, I think through these, I think it's working well, but still a long way to go. Private sector is also helping in organizations like NASSCOM, which is a industry association of IT, ITES companies. That's playing an important role. There are a couple of other LGOs and others who have digital training programs. There are a lot of civil society organizations who are working on this. So that's supporting the thing, but yeah, probably more data.
Amazing, thanks a lot. And actually, I'll add another number to your great list of numbers. 2.6 billion people. So that's the number of people that currently are not connected to the internet. So all of these people over the world, they couldn't even access any digital tools or digital learning tools. Sorry, I realize I haven't introduced myself. So I work at the International Telecommunication Union, and our mission is to connect the world. So this number, 2.6 billion people, is a number that ITU gives out periodically updated. And the other angle of what we're doing is sustainable digital transformation. So while we connect people, we want to make sure that the world, well, that e-waste rates are not increasing and increasing, which currently they are, but we're trying to counteract this, and also that the greenhouse gas emissions and energy consumption of the digital industry are not continuing to grow at the same rate as the digital adoption. And of course, in this regard, climate education is also really important. But I'll go into that in a moment. So Marcus, over to you to introduce the round here to your work. I'd like to give you a few minutes to introduce your work with a few project highlights.
Okay, so I'm Marcos. I would start saying that I'm especially happy to be here in Brazil because I'm Brazilian, although I'm working in the UK right now. And I am especially happy also because we are having space to discuss education and climate literacy. So my work as a research impact fellow at the University of Exeter is very focused on climate misinformation. So climate agenda, for sure, has many problems for us to solve, but climate misinformation is getting our attention for longer. And this is very close, very related with climate education, because we have a whole supply chain of misinformation on climate agenda. We have people who are making money of this industry, and educate people is one way for us to move far from this scenario. So the Nature and Climate Impact team, we are launching a tool called Climavar. Basically, is an AI tool to identify and explain this information using football language. So the metaphor of the VAR, so the VAR from football, as a good Brazilian, I love football, and UK people also enjoy football a lot. So we started to develop this concept in a way that sometimes you are reading something, you hear something, you are not 100% sure, because climate agenda is huge. It's hard to be aware and to know every point. So we built this tool in a way to make an accessible tool and engaging tool for general audience, especially focused on professors and students. Because also, I would say, we speak for Brazil because I know the reality, but I'm sure that many countries, sometimes in basic education, professors want to speak about climate, but they not always have the tools to do this. So this is our contribution on this scenario, trying to develop one more tool using football language to try to communicate climate science. So basically, this is our recent work on this agenda, and we truly believe in climate education, in the power of education to help us to fix climate agenda.
Amazing. Thanks a lot for sharing that specific project. And maybe I'll just like to follow up a little bit on this. So you've mentioned, specifically in Brazil, but overall, can you maybe give us a little bit more details of how multilingual and culturally relevant contexts are really expanding inclusivity and therefore then also climate education and climate action?
For sure. So when we started to think about this, of course we started in English, but suddenly and fast you realize that if you want to talk about climate in English, you are not inclusive. So we need to democratize the knowledge, we need to democratize the tools. So our next options were Portuguese, because we are coming to COP, because I'm Brazilian. So, but also Spanish, because for Latin America, football represents a strong cultural issue. And so now we have this tool in English, Spanish, and Portuguese to start with multilingual approach, and especially because if we are talking about football, these slangs, the expressions in Portuguese and Spanish and English, they are completely different. And if the user don't feel represented by that tool, he will not engage. So we need to translate. It's not about only translate the knowledge. It's about to understand and interpret the cultural expressions and make sure that we can bring this to the tool, we can embed this to the tool to make the tool interesting and see people using, enjoying it.
Amazing, thanks a lot. Jayanta, over to you. How do you see, well, we heard already, the role of, local actors are of course important. Where do you see the role of governments and international organizations in supporting universal access?
Well, that's a great question, because I think, if we are only able to say reach out to the urban areas, I think we fail. Especially in a country like India, if you talk about digital education. So you really need to reach the rural areas, the last mile. And in that, I think government and international organizations play the most critical role. I think from a government perspective, the way we see it is, I think, they are the architects of, I think, the scale and inclusion, because they need to provide the infrastructure that I spoke about, through some government policies. They need to integrate it with the existing education system, like the Diksha and the SWAYAM that I spoke about. And third is, of course, inclusion of the digital education and the right curriculum and the right vernacular languages and everything. So they play a very important role in facilitating all this. From international perspective, I think organizing, I see them as a global catalyst and a connector. Um, because after the government has played its role, you know you need capital, to enable the digital literacy, especially going on to the last mile. That's one of the things that probably international organizations get in. It's not that you really need a lot of money, but it's just to fill up the gaps, because the government policies are there. But if you want to focus on digital education, if there are certain last mile gaps that are there, you need these ILGOs to come in to kind of fill these last digital miles. Then, of course, on the content and capacity, it is very difficult, I think, for only India to kind of design an entire, content. Now, it could be available, say, in Brazil, or it could be available anywhere, and the essence remains the same. So I think what can be done is very usually, at least, let's say, a global south can have very similar challenges. So the content can be actually used or shared between these countries. And for that, I think the international organizations are absolutely the best place. And third, I would say, is the connection they bring in. So they can ensure that the government, the private sector, the public sector, the civil societies all come together from an implementation perspective. So I think the international organizations that way, I think, can play a very important role. So, if I have to summarize, I can say that, let's say, the government builds a highway, for the infrastructure. But then the international organizations need to come in with the fuel, with the GPS, with, the facilities and the partnerships to enable people to use the highway to actually drive. So that's how I see the role of these two entities.
Amazing, thanks. And you gave a good prompt there. So ITU and UNESCO, both international organizations, we have an initiative called GIGA, and the aim of this initiative is to connect every school in the world to the internet, and therefore then also learning resources. So yes, as international organizations, we do agree, that we're well placed, but of course, local governments are of course key actors. Nothing can happen without the governments on board. But then also, I'd like to see with you, where do you see, what kind of other strategies do you see connecting like low-income communities and rural communities? Where do you see the role of academia or private sector?
Yeah, I think I can say at least two things that we learned from previous projects and current ones, and from our experience. The first one is to co-create solutions. So one thing is, if we decide to build an app, and then we develop something, and we go to a farmer in Brazil and we expect that he will not use, because mainly we don't know his problems really. So I think co-creation is one very important thing. It's fundamental for us to build real useful solutions, to listen their problems. And we have partners in projects in Brazil, in Africa, in many countries where we count on local partners, and that can reach these people, the farmers, and listen them and understand their problem, interpret the situation, so we can add our capacity in terms of development and solutions to make something really interesting. About also, again, about communication. So we need to speak the same language. One thing that we learned that's really, really strong in every aspect in climate, people usually care about things they love. So if you want someone to study about climate, it's one situation. If you want someone to play with you the game of climate, is a very different situation. So I think making this connection and speak the same language is a way, because of course we have hardware problems, we have connectivity, we have the availability of the resources that may be limited, and it is limited in many places. But the reality today is that many farmers already use a smartphone. They have a good level of digital literacy to use the tool if the tool is helpful. So I think we are at the point that we are overcoming some gaps in digital literacy. Of course, we have much more things to do on this space, but the next step is to communicate in the same language and to listen the problems and to think together for the solutions.
Great, thanks a lot for sharing these very concrete examples, working with local farmers as well. Over to you. Can you also maybe share a few more details about, what kind of concrete partnerships do you see if education systems work together with businesses and technology providers?
I think it's very important for all the stakeholders to come together, and I think I'll give you an example of the solar decathlon event that we do. So that is, a classic example of a partnership, because one is we are, of course, it's become the world's largest collegiate challenge for designing net zero energy and water buildings. We kind of figure out that the current education system lacks, the practical education, or even the best of the universities in India, what we call the IITs or the NITs. They don't really focus on some of the details that are required for the next generation of buildings. So this is the Solar Decathlon program started off in US as a part of the US DOE. So we kind of picked it up for India, and with our partner organizations, we started this about 5 years back. So the event can only be successful if there is a partnership with the industry and the government. So the students pick up a project, a live project with a real estate partner. So they work. There are 6 different categories of building types they can choose. Now the industry partner comes in with a real project so that they can actually use it. Now there are other the technical and the manufacturers and others who work as mentors, and others who are providing the solutions and education that needs to be incorporated in the designs and everything that they build in. And the third is, of course, this is possible only if there are organizations like Design Builder and IEC. They are 2 organizations who are providing free the technical tools for doing that. So without that, this program cannot be successful. And they are in kind, almost giving us $1 million worth of licenses every year free for the students to use. The finals happen at a campus which is owned by Infosys, which is the India's largest IT company. So we have all kind of come together to enable the students and others to get the education, to work on a live project, to really learn, and then come to the finals. And like he said, what we did is, you can always give this education, and it's all given digital. So we use a platform called Moodle. So all the trainings over the full almost 8 to 9 months is provided on digital platforms. There are webinars that are there by industry experts from across India and even across the world who are talking to these students. We do faculty development programs as part of this, all digital again. But then the finals is somewhere they actually present the designs and everything. So this is only possible when all the entities are coming together. We offer internships to the students and others. So that's only possible if you actually have the private sector and everybody coming in. Public sector also kind of supports this, but yeah, it has to be a larger partnership goal that enables it to be done.
Amazing, thanks a lot. Yeah, and I love that the students can work on real life projects and not theoretical frameworks. And that does remind me at my time at university as well, where we had very good connections to the businesses coming in, working so that we could work on real life cases. So it's fantastic that you're taking this also into the e-learning and the digital space. So that's really good. Maybe just to extend a little bit on this, but of course, it's fantastic to work on very concrete projects. But Marcos, how do you see that curricula could be tailored systematically, really, to build skills relevant for green jobs and the sustainable transformation?
Yeah, I think so far we're working in a way that now we are aware that we have this need, and we need to move for building capacity on this. So we need to think on this. I will speak for University of Exeter. We can see this multidisciplinary approach in all courses and disciplines in Exeter. The university is doing a great job on this to bring the climate agenda, to bring the sustainability, all these subjects that few years ago, I would say I'm a computer scientist. I never studied sustainability or how to build an efficient algorithm in terms of sustainability. So I think few years ago, the disciplines were like separated boxes, and now we are trying to make a one bigger box. Of course, this requires a lot of work to organize this big box. Otherwise, it will be a mess. But I think we are starting to create the capacity on the workforce to be aware. Because I'm sure, for example, using the same example, I know that the students in computer science at University of Exeter, they have this kind of concern. They are learning how to build more efficient algorithms in terms of sustainability, how to not waste computing resource, how to not build heavy digital AI models to do simple tasks. These kinds of concerns that we didn't have before. So I think building this capacity, this critical thinking about the environment is really important for us to move from discourse to a practical training and creative skills for the workforce in next years.
No, that's a really good point. I mean, like everybody says, sustainability should be an afterthought, but should be interwoven into everything that society is doing. Just as a thought on this, so the project I'm leading, Green Digital Action, all about digital for climate action, but also green digital infrastructure. So we've just launched, together with a startup from the UK, we've launched a open GitHub repository for all things for software developers, how they can develop or design green software from the scratch. So that goes into what you said, that anybody working on IT and so on should from beginning on learn how to code green.
Yeah, and if I may add one more thing, we are starting a project in very similar direction with a startup in London to build sustainable websites. So nowadays, everyone needs to have a website, and usually we are building websites in a general way. So we use, let's say, have PDFs. We use lots of things that are not in good practice of web design. So this thing is very important for us to pay attention, because it's not complex once you are a web design. There are a few good practices in terms of sustainability that you can make your website consumes way more energy, water, all resource, and be more sustainable. So that's especially important. Yeah.
Of course. Just one other thing on this in this front. So just 2 days ago here at COP, we launched the AI Climate Institute together with UNESCO and Anatel, the Brazilian telecommunications regulator. And this will also focus on these two angles. So we'll have basic courses, basically on how to use AI for, climate policy, but also more advanced courses for technical professionals, for IT professionals as well, for green code that would go more into detail. But an open repository for all things, like all types of e-learnings and online material is also part of this, so that we can benefit from all the material that has been designed. So that leads me over to you, Jayanta. You've shared a few great, examples already of projects you're working on. You also did share already some good, of course, takeaways that the business engagement is important. But can you share with us a few other learnings from some of the initiatives that you've led?
Yeah, absolutely. I think sustainability is a large topic, and when you're talking about, so we work primarily in the energy space, energy efficiency. So we work on decarbonization of a couple of sectors like the built environment, sustainable cooling. We work with the state governments and training, capacity building of MSMEs. But again, it's a mix of digital and physical kind of education. The reason we picked up Solar Decathlon, because it kind of aligned very well with the work that we do, because it's like SDG 8 and SDG 4. But I think the the scope and the reason why he also did it is that 70% of the buildings in India have not yet been built, which is going to be, say, the target by 2050. Now, that's if they're not designed right, you're actually setting it up for disaster. It's like going to be a a non-performing asset, which is just lying there and which is guaranteed to fail. So that was the reason why we said that, it's very important that we start developing the new generation of leaders who know how to build it right. Because one person, if he goes out in a particular firm, even if they don't know it, they may be able to influence and actually have a cascading effect going forward. So over the last 5 years, example, like we have trained about 8,000 students, about 400 faculty members in how to bring in the program that we're talking about as a part of their curriculum. The influence is already like almost, from sheer number perspective, 125 million square feet of potential built area has got impacted just in the last 5 years that we are designing, and going forward it will be more. And almost 51 million tons of CO2 emissions can potentially be abated only by the 5 years, the kind of designs these guys have come up with. What we also did is we wanted, we didn't want it to be restricted, because one of the things we spoke about is how can everybody access. So we have a great e-learning, modules and platform, but it was restricted to only, say, 2,000 students every year who were participating in the competition. Then we kept getting that, how can the other students and others can get access to it. So what we did is we picked up the entire modules that we have for the training. We put it free of cost in Coursera. Now, anybody, anywhere in the world can access that course free of cost. We already have, in just few months of putting it in without any marketing, some 8,000 people who have already enrolled, and some 5,500 people who have finished and got a certificate for this program. And it's all, as I said, it's, we did it free of cost for everybody to access, professionals to access, other students to access anywhere. And again, even outside. So I think from the learning perspective, I clearly say that, you need to pick up maybe the areas where you can have the maximum impact, if not now, and especially in the near future, and, focus on those. Climate education is critical. It's part of a lot of the schools in India, luckily, at least in the urban areas. But for us, I think the challenge is how do we integrate that into the curriculum and take it to the rural areas, to the, the last mile where they're able to use it. And just one more thing I'll say is very interesting, the farmers, the app, everything that you discussed. So in my previous avatar, and I used to work for Nokia and the handsets business. As early as 2010, we used to have a small tool called Nokia Live Tools. It was providing the same things that you're talking about, farmers, the weather, what time to plant a crop, what are the issues, depending on a pin code level, which is at a small district level. And it was all done using SMS. So we used to have a small client built on the Nokia phones, and we had 80% market share in the normal phones. Those were no smartphones that time. And through SMS, we would provide them all this information on a daily basis. Learn English. We used to provide them English education. We used to provide farmers the education about their crop. We used to provide general knowledge information for students in the rural areas who wanted to, study and give competitive exams. So it's not something new, but I think, with the technical, I think the evolution that's happened, I think it's just become very easy, multimodal with videos and AV. We were restricted that time, but I think there were organizations like ours who actually made a start. And we had, million plus people who are subscribed to our services way back even as 2010, just using SMS.
Thanks a lot for sharing that. And a very good point, that it's not just about the students, it's also how can the broader public access these resources. It's one thing to, from beginning on learn the green, but there's many people in the workforce already that did not have the green included, or still not have don't have the green included from beginning on. So how can we reach the workers today that are already, well, in their jobs even since 20 years, to adopt now the green perspective. So it's really fantastic that these e-learnings are more and more also accessible to those. Can you, before I check with our audience if there's any questions, can you share a few key learnings from your specific projects that you've mentioned?
Well, I think based on recent works, and also a few years ago, I was working at University of Florida during my PhD, and we also did some work with farmers there. So I think it really makes difference also to spend some time together in the field. So for this, for any kind of applied computing solution, it's really important to be there, to go there and understand, feel the weather, feel the distance from the near hotspot, the near Wi-Fi router, like feel the conditions where you want to deploy a solution, because there's no other really efficient way than that. You need to go there, and especially this also helps not on the technical quality of the solutions, but also helps on building trust. So building trust is also something very important on co-creation process. Sometimes if your stakeholder does not trust you too much, he will not share honestly their problem. He will not share all the context, and this will delay the action. This will delay the solution. So I would say that to deploy something at, it can be, we are talking about farmer, but we can think about industry. We can think about shopping. So if you want to build some solution for a mall, you need to go there. You need to walk around. You need to understand the stores. You need to understand the layout of the building. This kind of apply it and really on field learning.
How do you build the trust? Or is that really because you're there in person, they see, you have an actual interest, or do you have other strategies?
I would say that this is not a quick process. This takes time. But as soon as you can show your stakeholder can have real benefits, can be financial benefits, can be social benefits, can be any kind of benefits from your solution, they will start to trust you. We, in the project that I worked before, basically we always try to show some financial result to open the conversation, but there are many other things that we can help in terms of solutions. So I would say that start with the money, go for understand what are the other problems, and you can try to solve them and deliver impact and deliver benefits. So then suddenly you are best friends.
Thanks a lot. Just want to see if there's a question from the audience.
Not really a question. I'm Janet from Seychelles Islands, not too far from India, in the Indian Ocean. We are very small, with about 100,000 people. And one of our challenge when it comes to digital education is the cost of internet, because we don't have, I think we have only 3 internet providers, and because we are small, and this is a great challenge for us. The next challenge in Seychelles is uh, qualified teachers, I would say, in schools to teach. Because once they are trained and well qualified, then you see the private sectors poaching them. So I don't know if you have means of dealing with those. I don't know if what you work with universities, with schools, and you also face the same problem sometimes, the private sectors, because all schools many are from government, and perhaps the salary is not the same as the private.
Thank you very much. Very relevant points. Thanks.
No, no, I think absolutely. In India, what we've really seen is that I gave the example of our program. So what I think the teacher education and everything, one is of course it's provided by the government, which is free of cost for the government schools. But for the private sector, there are e-learning programs and others. We have something called a corporate social responsibility (CSR), wherein the private sector actually gives about 2% of their profits. They can pick up any topic, but most of the organizations either pick up health or education. And in the education part, they are upskilling the technical, say the internet access. How do you provide internet access in the rural areas, say backed by solar power? So they are doing that free of cost as a part of their CSR programs, so that internet reaches the lowest, the furthest area. There are organizations who are providing lighting. They're providing schools over there. There's private sector which is supporting them with the education material and everything, the laptops. After 2 years, like we used to say our laptop is obsolete, but it's not really. So, once the organization would take it back, and I was working for Microsoft that time, so all the laptops at Microsoft would be picked up, and they would be given to a non-profit who would go to the villages and give the laptops. So those would be used for actually education at the rural areas for people who did not have the right tools. Even if you give them internet, they didn't have anything to use and learn for education. So these kind of private-public partnerships are very, very important. We have seen that succeed in India. I think that is one of the models I would recommend. But also, I think there are a lot of free learning modules and everything which is available. As I said, we provided free faculty education programs. This is at a university and college level, the Solar Decathlon. But we help the faculty to develop a curriculum that they can take in their colleges and train the other students who are not part of the competition. So that's really helping in kind of upskilling them in that particular areas, and we are giving them the free learning modules that they can use. It's all free, of course. We are a non-profit organization, not for profit, so we can afford to do that because this falls for public good. But it's only possible because we have funding from philanthropies and others who enable us to do that. Without that, we wouldn't have been able to do that. Even with the best intent, we would not have been able to do it.
Yeah, I would say that I don't have too much to add to the because I agree everything you said, and I would suggest to try to show what's the real impact of having education, because usually in the same way that I mentioned before with the stakeholders in projects, as soon as you realize, and I'm sure that the private sector will realize the big difference that will be to provide education to the community. So I think they will understand that this is a mutual benefit, and also to look for philanthropy funding also is always a good idea. It depends on the amount of money you need. Of course, there's different levels of difficult to get this. But for digital education, recently I saw some good, very strong movement on this direction. So I would say that maybe to try to compound with private sector and with some funding, and for sure with some university. So I'm aware that, for example, University of Exeter has a bunch of programs, free programs to train people in different disciplines. So I think, yeah, a solution compound these three elements will maybe work right.
Just to add from ITU's perspective, and we can maybe have a conversation afterwards on the Seychelles case specifically, but so we have an initiative called Digital Infrastructure Investment Initiative to see how can we really support, where can the funding come from to connect those that are currently unconnected, and then also in the GIGA project that I mentioned before to connect the schools, we're working on bringing in the funding to make internet affordable, for example. And then on the teacher piece, I mean, e-learnings, we've heard before there's lots of different e-learnings that are available free of charge. ITU also has the ITU Academy with many different courses on, well, AI, data centers, telecommunications networks, but then also on green. We just released our new training on green data centers for policymakers. But then also we have what is like sustainable and circular procurement of ICT. So it goes back to what we discussed before on it's not just for students, but also for actually practitioners working in the field. So we can definitely discuss after. And then the way we work in different countries is we have training partners. So we have over 14 like ITU Academy technical partners that are more like towards policymakers, but we also have digital training centers for really basic digital skills. So I would need to see with the Seychelles specifically where the nearest training center is, but these resources can really be leveraged for on-the-ground training, digital training. All right, I think we're almost over time, but I do want to give both of you 1 to 2 minutes to share a few final thoughts before we wrap up the panel.
Okay, yeah, so thank you again for this moment and for sharing all this knowledge. I would say we can educate people on climate in a more funniest way. So climate science can be funny, can be interesting. Not climate science itself, but the way that we communicate. So there is hope to share the knowledge. Recently, we launched a campaign in Brazil with Globo, one of the biggest media companies here when with a comedian called the Rafael Portugal, making fun and explaining about climate change impacts on acai, cocoa, and coffee, for example. That our coffee is being smaller and we are paying more. Things like this that are easy to understand. Now we are approaching sports. Then later maybe we can try expand to cricket in India, for example. We can try to speak about hockey for Canada, about American football for US. We can do the climate communication, use this approach for climate communication in a more funny way and interesting way, especially engaging way. So this is my final message, that we can keep working on this to make the knowledge more accessible and engaging.
Thank you. Yes, very relevant point. I think the more people realize that it's close to your life, what is happening, and how it impacts you, yes, the more impactful it is. So thanks a lot for this final thought. Jayanta, over to you.
So yes, I think this is a very critical topic, and I think it's not a luxury, but it's a necessity that everybody gets educated in this. And slowly, I think with the climate change, with extreme events that are happening, I think the awareness is there at the very grassroots level. They know that what's happening is impacting them, drought or floods or heat waves, especially in a country like India. So that the awareness is there. There is a desire to learn. It's just that behavioral energy efficiency, as we call, that's something that an individual can do at home. I think that's where we are starting with, and then taking it on to the next level. I completely agree with them that unless they see benefits, a lot of them will not do it. So the way we also did it is we made a very nice animated video in vernacular languages. When we will work with farmers as well, we make pack houses, but there is a huge kind of a resistance for people to buy even vegetables which came out of a pack house or a cold storage. They said, oh, it's not fresh, I'll not use it. But to educate them that it is that good, it actually helps prevent nutrition and all that. So the basic level of education needs to go out. Awareness, he mentioned, that's very critical. That and gamified version really works well. That's why the events that we do, we try to make it gamified so that people can have fun. So we released a card game that actually we distributed free of cost in schools. It's a kind of a monopoly, but you trade carbon credits, you do projects and programs. I mean, these are small ways that we are trying to reach out to schools and others, and pass on the message at that level that guys, this is important. This is how you learn, and then you take it in your life and then take it forward. So. Absolutely.
Amazing, thanks a lot. I mean, that we covered a lot of spectrum. I mean, first, of course, covered how, well, access, of course, is, of course, the key, the first piece, access to internet, to digital tools, but then also to the learning materials, the climate learning materials. Is really important, how it starts with students at university, but how it should reach the entire world, and how e-learning is really key, but then also that we have to go on the ground to not just stay in the virtual world to show the real benefits that it does bring on to the world and to the people. So thanks a lot for this conversation, and thanks a lot for joining us here. Yeah.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.